Well, it's all over but the crying, I suppose. Welcome to episode 14, where we move on to the semifinals of our 4th and long fantasy football. Week one, we had some winners, we had some losers, and two losers are about to break down the winners. Myself and Randy, as always. Randy, tough loss, and welcome to the semis, I guess, as we evaluate it. How you doing?
Uh, you might think the crying's over. For me, the crying's not over yet. I'm still devastated for my loss.
Oh, I hear you. I had a few wellness checks, but we're doing well, and we're not going to get into it too much. But I guess you and me are battling it out next week in the consolation. But nobody wants to hear about that crap. So let's
Okay.
get. That'll be offline banter. But let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So we're going to go right into the semifinal, guys. Kind of the same format we did last time with Alan. Alan's unfortunately not on this episode, but I'm sure he'll be looking forward to the next matchup that we'll be talking about and breaking down. So, getting right into it. Global warming. What a win. First overall. And he remains first overall as he's going to play Cody. What a surprise team coming in. Texas Walker Rangers. Ryan's actually projected 107, where Cody was projected 112 when I did my notes. I noticed the numbers have changed a bit here, but kind of the same spread. These two teams actually played each other in week 9, where global warming won 142 to 110. And so it's going to be an interesting one. I think this is going to be a good tilt here. But Randy, since you've had an episode off, I'm sure you've had a lot to digest. So why don't you start us off with the quarterback category and break that down?
Sure thing. Well, we're going to start with global warming and Patrick Mahomes. Uh, he's uh, he was projected for 28 points around there. This is definitely uh, another good primetime matchup. Even though it's against a tough team, but we've seen how he does against tough teams. Uh, he might not win the game like we had on that shootout Monday night against the Rams, but he still puts up good points, and that's what it's all about here in fantasy. He's on a short week, but I think in this case that's not such a bad thing because the Chargers are on a short week as well with the Thursday night, and but it could be a real run and gun type game, especially with with Spencer Ware being doubtful. Not that he was all that much of a running threat, anyways. But if you're down to your third string guy, as much as they say Tyreek Hill's probably going to play, he's still a bit hobbled. But we'll talk about that in the next segment. So I'm looking for a really strong game from Mahomes again. On the other side of the ball, we've got Texas Walker Rangers with Aaron Rodgers. Now he has a very very tough matchup against a tough Bears defense in the Windy City. Now I checked the weather. It turns out it's going to be one of the nicer days this week in Chicago. Not overly windy, so they might actually be able to throw the ball a bit. That being said, though, they're going to be short passes anyways, not because of the wind or the weather, but because that Bears pass rush is going to get home a lot, and Rodgers is going to have to dink and dunk the whole time, hoping that Jimmy Graham and some of his rookie receivers can catch the ball because Devontae Adams is not going to get enough time to get open down the field. I think even if the Bears pull ahead, there will be plenty of garbage time points and a lot of fourth quarter touchdowns and fourth quarter points. Don't be surprised to see that. That's what we saw the last time they played. So
Mm-hmm.
with these two scenarios for these quarterbacks going forward, I'm going to give the edge to Mahomes, but only by 5 to 10 points. So reasonably close on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I like what you had to say there. We've been looking at this on our calendars for a while, the KC versus the Charger game. I mean, that's going to be the AFC battle. That'll be nice to see how that game shakes down. I'm looking forward to Thursday night or tomorrow night, I guess, for sure. Yeah, Mahomes has been solid all year, but that Chargers defense is something that I think a lot of people underrate. Where they've given up the seventh fewest points to the quarterback position, and Mahomes did not look good against Baltimore. Actually, there was a lot of miscues there. And now you already mentioned Spencer Ware might be doubtful, but Tyreek Hill most likely is going to play, but questionable as well. So you don't know if there's a lingering issue there as well. And of course, we're not going to dive into it, but we all know Kareem Hunt is no longer part of that too. So some banged up receiving core there for Mahomes, but the kid is pretty solid and he's having an MVP season. On the other side, you got Rodgers. We all know what happened week one. He came back and got the win over Chicago, which I think surprised a lot of people. But his play has not really been as good since then. And he's got that tough matchup. And Chicago's defense actually has 7 interceptions against 2 touchdown passers over the last 3 weeks. So if you're a quarterback over the last 3 weeks who's only throwing 2 touchdowns, most likely you're probably getting picked 2 or 3 times that game based on that rating. So Aaron Rodgers has got to be sharp with the ball. And his passing numbers have gone down. He's actually only thrown for 230 on average over the last 4 of the 5 games. And if that defense gets to him, those numbers could be going down. So for me, I think the Chicago defense is more atrocious than the Chargers, so I'm going to give the edge to Mahomes here. So I agree with you on that one. Moving into the wide receiver category, so we got a couple guys to talk about here. I'll just start on global warming side. Again, I mentioned Hill. He's got 100 plus in his last 3 or 4 games, so he still does what he can do. I think he needs to play, otherwise I'm not sure what's going to happen here, and he's got to get those touches to stretch the field because, again, with Spencer Ware doubtful, Sammy Watkins, I believe, is also doubtful or questionable. So Tyreek has to be the guy because you can't just check down to Travis Kelce all day. On the other side, he's got Tyler Boyd going up against Oakland. Now, I would love to say that this is a good matchup, but I also thought Antonio Brown versus Oakland was a good matchup, and you saw how wrong I was. He's only got 2 touchdowns in his last 6 games, and only one of those games he's reached 100 yards. So, and AJ Green's out. You'd think he'd be utilized more, but maybe that's also we're noticing the effects of lack of Andy Dalton. On the other side with Cody, you got Stephon Diggs. I think a concern is that his targets over the last few games have basically been cut in half. He could bounce back against Miami. They do allow some plays to kind of get down the field, but I know Thielen, I think, has become the guy there, and Diggs is more of a secondary, what's the word? He kind of just distracts people mostly.
Decoy.
Yeah, decoy, that's the word. And, they're fighting for a playoff spot, so I think Minnesota's got to come out. And I know Cousins hasn't had the best games either here. And they're playing Miami, but they're at home, so it looks for Diggs to maybe do something in the dome. And the other guy here I'll just touch on before I let you kind of take over here is Juju. He's taken every look away from AB, and I'm not going to dwell on that, but he has been clutch. 8 100-plus yard games this year. And yes, he's going up against New England, and we know this is a good AFC tilt as well. But they give up the most, they give up the 10th most to the wide receiver position. So there are opportunities for Juju to get that, and I think if Ben is healthy, he'll look to him as well. So in this particular, with these 4 not touching any of the bench, I'll give the edge to Texas Walker.
Okay, yeah. Sounds pretty good there. I'm just going to add a few things. I'm going to start with the same guys you had there. I'm going to start with global warming, Tyreek Hill. I watched the 4th quarter of that game with Baltimore there. Tyreek, especially when Tyreek Hill left the game, came back in. He made that catch on that big 4th down late in the 4th quarter, and yeah, he got like a 48-yard play out of it, but he also crossed the field, and with an injured ankle, it's an injured ankle. He was hobbling off the field after almost every play, or at least hobbling back to the line of scrimmage at the very least. And with a short week to the return, I don't know how much speed he's got. He doesn't have that home run, long bomb, breakaway kind of speed when you're on that ankle, because that 4th down catch was a coming back to the quarterback kind of catch, not a post route or a corner route or anything like that where you have to beat the guy. So he'll still get targeted plenty, but like I said, he won't have that long bomb. Be harder to get touchdowns that way because if he doesn't get the home run touchdowns, Travis Kelce will take a lot of those red zone looks away from him, especially since he knows he's healthy. And as far as Tyler Boyd, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Even though it appears to be a good matchup against Oakland, no Andy Dalton, no good value for Tyler Boyd. That just seems to be the way it is. Tyler Boyd had a really good start to the season, but I think that might have been, all Andy Dalton and all AJ Green helping on the far side of it, giving him a more favorable matchup. So I don't think Tyler Boyd's the home run guy that or I should say, he's not the solid guy at the wideout position that he was earlier in the year. And now over to Texas Walker Rangers with Stefan Diggs. The Vikings fired their OC.
I saw that.
After Boogs and Witt kind of just took turns demolishing the offense on the commentary there on Monday Night Football. So, but you can't change that much in an offense over the course of a week just by firing the OC. And even if they do, they're probably going to want to get the ball on the ground a lot more, because that's something that, other than 1 or 2 games in the middle of the season, they haven't been able to do. So that may take even more away from Stefan Diggs. But then again, you never know. With a new OC and a new plan, maybe they'll just want to stretch the field a bit more, and then maybe just not playing that all of a sudden great Seattle defense again might just be the ticket to a better game. With Juju Smith-Schuster, again, you also mentioned it looks like a good matchup with New England, but it's also the kind of thing where when it's the sort of thing like Brady against Big Ben, as we get classic game between them. The quarterbacks tend to show up to play on that one, and I think there's more than enough love to go around for Antonio Brown and Juju on this. With that to Texas Walker Rangers, and I'm giving them, same with the quarterbacks, about a 5 to 10 point difference on that position.
Okay. Well, if you want to keep going, why don't you start us off with the running backs, and I'll jump in.
Okay, I'll keep the ball rolling here with. I'll start with global warming again, and we'll start with Mark Ingram. Now, he's only expected for about 9.9, about 10 points that area. Obviously, the Saints bounced back a bit with a win there. Didn't get a ton of points. 28 points is actually pretty low for the Saints, but it does count as a bounce back win. They have the extra time to prepare, which is always nice, and we know Sean Payton can definitely cook up some good offensive schemes, but the fact still remains Mark Ingram is still sharing the ball with Alvin Kamara, and that makes him very touchdown dependent. If he gets a touchdown, he has a good week. If he doesn't get a touchdown, well, he's sharing the yardage. He's sharing the yardage too much with a really good running back. Now, the other big development, we had thought he'd been lost for a while, but Melvin Gordon looks like he's going to be a game-time decision this week, which for a Thursday night game is actually quite remarkable. It's the kind of thing Ryan's thinking right now, if only they played on Sunday, a couple extra days rest would have made a big difference, probably would have got a, he will play kind of status. Now, of course, being that this is such a huge game in the playoff position of the AFC, they're probably rushing him back a bit. Yahoo's pretty much given him his pre-injury projections here with about 15 points expected, even though he's coming back very quickly and doesn't get as much rest. But there's still potential for a big game. Like I said, this game could end up being run and gun. I know the Chiefs' defense did pretty good against Baltimore, but come on, man, it's Baltimore. Even though Lamar Jackson's a good young quarterback and he ran the ball a lot, they don't have a whole lot of weapons. It's going to be a completely different animal here on Thursday night. Now, moving over to Texas Walker Rangers, what else can you say about Christian McCaffrey, man? Just expect a big game out of him. He's not going to have a bad game. I mean, if he does, it'll be much more of a shock than trying to predict how good a game it'll be. We can just go ahead and say 18 points. Projection's pretty standard for that.
Yeah.
The one I really want to talk about, though, is Marlon Mack. This is a very tough matchup against the Cowboys defense that has been shutting down running backs the last couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And now, of course, he'll have more success between the tackles, mainly because the Cowboys linebackers are built for speed. So as far as trying to get around the corner, good luck trying to get that. Those linebackers will run you down. Uh, I'm not sure if that's the way the Colts offense is going to want to go to try to pound the Cowboys defense. They're going to have to convert first downs because I don't think Marlon Mack's going to get more than 3 yards a run. At least every time he touches it. Now, of course, there's always touchdowns in there too. But so I guess with that judgment, I will give the edge to McCaffrey and Mack just because I have more confidence in McCaffrey having a big game than in Gordon having a big game coming back from injury. And I'll give that split of 5 to 10 points as well, which is not a whole lot.
Okay. Yeah, you covered a lot there, so I'll just try to zip through here as best I can. Just a few other points I want to bring up, and again, just starting with global warming. Mark Ingram, as we all know, New Orleans going up against Carolina. That should be a good game to watch as well on Monday night. Now, is it his turn or is it Kamara's turn to have a good week? Because I don't know anymore. The other thing is that Carolina's rush defense, I think, you just touched on Dallas's defense. That Carolina rush defense is pretty something as well. They're averaging only 97 yards a game to running backs. So they're not even allowing them to get very high. So that's pretty exciting as well. Yeah, no, I thought he had Jackson in the starting lineup, but I figured he would give Gordon a punch or a look because he's going to have to monitor tomorrow up to about 7:19 p.m. and then find out if he's playing or not, like you said. I think Gordon's going to go, but how much he gets out of it, I'm not sure. Breaking development, I know that Ryan picked up Damian Williams. I've never heard of him, but apparently he's Spencer Ware's backup. Now with Spencer Ware being doubtful, this is a smart move by Ryan to build up that depth for if they can't get the Kansas City running back, because I don't think he really trusts Jackson. I don't know if Gus Edwards is a good pick because it seems like Dixon seems to be taking some of those balls away too. But he's got some matchups, and I think he'll have to figure out if he's going to tinker with them at all. McCaffrey, enough said. I think I said in the last episode for my team, Gurley, he's just a guy you don't really need to talk about. McCaffrey seems to be that guy this year as well. He's got 12 touchdowns over his last 7 games, and from a fantasy's perspective, what a perfect time to get hot when you got a guy like that. So he's going to do what he's going to do. I like what you said about Marlon Mack. I think Dallas is going to eat him up because, man, that defense is something else right now. And he's been under 10 points 4 of the last 5 games. Now, he's got Chris Carson as his flex, and I just want to touch base on that Carson's actually been having some good numbers over the last 4 weeks. He's been averaging probably about 12 points from a flex position with 3 touchdowns. He is going up against the 49ers. I think there's potential for them to do something there. But the 49ers, they have an also pretty good rush defense that haven't allowed a running back to reach 70 yards in any of the last 4 games. So we'll see if he can do it, because if you look at his bench, there is no other running back, option, and I don't think he really has a flex option. So I think his hands are tied with Mack and Carson in the lineup. But for me, knowing Gordon's coming back, is there an opportunity to do something? This is tough. I think I'm going to give a slight edge to global warming in this, because I feel like if Gordon's there, there's an opportunity to do something, and if Ingram can get those punches in, because I think both these games are going to be shootouts, and I think those running backs could do some punch-in damage. So I like that a little bit more than Mack, and that's why I'm giving it to global warming. So we're kind of splitting hairs there, but it'll be close. Moving on to the tight end position, I'll just keep this going. Ertz on global warming and Kittle for Texas Walker. Just again with Ryan, this is a very solid resource for Wentz. However, I'm not sure if you watched the update. Wentz is listed as out for this week against the Rams. So, Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles is going to play. Now, does he have the same connection as Ertz? Well, you can say they played pretty good last year, but I don't think it's the safety blanket connection that Ertz and Wentz have. Plus, Foles really hasn't played much this year, so he's going to have to get back into the groove against the Rams defense, who's probably pretty pissed off at the way they played against Chicago. So this is going to be an interesting one. I think LA, like I say, is pretty good. Ertz's numbers are actually trending downwards over the last few games. outside of that Philly game where he lit it up. Sorry, the Philly game, the Dallas game, where he did pretty well. And I don't know. The Rams do allow the tight end positions to get going on their defense, so we'll see. Kittle, what an unreal week last week. I think if we were still doing Player of the Week, I don't know about you, but I'd probably give it to him. 210 yards from a tight end with, what did he have, one or two touchdowns?
Yeah.
So what a week that was, and he's going up against Seattle, and I think that's going to be a good game as well. And this Mullins, he seems to love Kittle. Just again, these quarterbacks are now starting to find tight ends, just those little 5-6 yard plays. And he did get 70 yards on Seattle the last time they played them. For me, I originally had this going to global warming, but I'd like to correct my decision, and I will give it to Texas and Kittle, just based on the fact that Wentz is no longer playing.
Okay. Yeah, there's not too much for me to add to that. Other than I think Zach Ertz will be the quarterback's favorite target, no matter who the quarterback is. It may not have the best, they may not be best buddies on and off the field, but Foles is still smart enough to know that Zach Ertz is a heck of a tight end and a really good option for him. Kittle, same thing, is obviously his quarterback's favorite target, as you mentioned. I don't know if you can say that it's really a short week for Seattle. It's just one shorter day. It's supposed to be weather. It's supposed to be raining the weather-wise on the West Coast, so that may affect the fact that no one's going to go deep. It might be a slug it out in the rain kind of game, which isn't the worst thing for a tight end. It's just that they might not he might not break off any 200-yard games. I'm going to go. I know you already talked about one flex. Are you going to talk about the other flex guys, or
go ahead? Go ahead.
Or should I just jump right in and finish my talk on the flex guys? I guess first I should say the tight end. I judge it as a push. They're considered equal in this case for me. But at the flex, I just went ahead and plugged in Gus Edwards as the flex for Ryan. You could pick the third, fourth, fifth string Chiefs running back. They have a good offense, but are they really that good at the running game that you're going to pick any, college Division II dropout guy that they pick up next? I think Gus Edwards is still the better option just because he'll get lots of touches.
Yeah.
And as far as Chris Carson goes, I had already mentioned, the weather calls for rain, so they'll probably ride the running backs a bit more in that game. It's a decent matchup as well. But at the end of the day, there's still two running backs. Not really sure how they'll do. I put a push for that one.
Okay.
And I know you don't talk about kickers or defense. I'm not going to talk about the kickers.
We'll talk about defense, but I don't want to talk about kickers. But you can.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm just going to quickly mention because the defense disparity in this particular matchup is worth noting because Buffalo has a much better matchup. Look for a 5 to 10 point advantage on defense, which is very big in the playoffs.
Yep. Like I say, I won't be touching on kickers, but I do have some notes on defenses. So for Buffalo, I agree with you. I think they have the better matchup. But it's interesting, in the last 7 weeks, they've only had one 10-plus point game from a defensive perspective. Now, getting into double digits as a defense is tough, but they've also had a minus point game in there, so it just goes to show you they can get up, but they also can go pretty far down. But I think that Detroit O-line is so bad, and how many times have we ripped Stafford for bad performances, and it's not always his fault. It seems the defense gets in there. So I think Buffalo is going to have opportunities to do that against Stafford and Detroit. Philly, they got kind of the similar stats with the plus points and the minus points like Buffalo. But again, I mentioned it before, I just think the Rams are hungry, and with Wentz out, now Foles is Foles, he's not some kid. But I'm going to give it to global warming with Buffalo just based on the fact I think they have a way better matchup against Detroit. And I think you're right. I think they'll beat Philly by probably 5 to 9, somewhere in their points. Just a couple notes. Just a quick question, Randy, that we can... it's playoffs. You win and you go to the finals. You lose and you're kind of not really playing for much. Do you think Cody's got the quarterback decision right? We've talked about that all year between Rodgers and Cousins. I just had a question mark here. Is Cousins the better play this week? Maybe.
It's hard to say because he did so terrible on Monday night. They fired the OC, like I said. There's a lot of question marks there, but maybe if Adam Thielen was hurt, hurt worse than he is, and maybe out for the game, this decision might be easier. But my gut wants to say that Cousins will do better, but there's a lot of question marks there, and at the same time, you don't want to question Aaron Rodgers, but that matchup with that defense is such a nasty one. It's really hard to say. My gut says Kirk Cousins will have a better week, but how much better? And at the same time, Aaron Rodgers just might pull off a good one anyways. You never know.
Well, before we might as well wrap up this matchup because we got one more to talk about. But for me, I'm going to predict that global warming wins 119 to 110, and the reason I'm saying that is, and this is either going to be a good thing for him or it's going to be a curse. There's a lot of investment in the KC Charger game. Now, if this is any indication of how these teams have played, similar to the KC Rams game, this score could climb. And that could bode well for Ryan. If it's a battle in the trenches, which I don't think that will be the case, then that will hinder him. But I think it's going to be a lot of quick touchdowns stretching the field and back and forward, and I think that's what gives him the win. I like Cody's roster. I like his team. But I just think that one matchup is just going to have too many opportunities for Ryan to pull ahead.
I agree. I also predict my verdict is for global warming to win by 5 to 10 points. It'll be one of the closer matchups.
Okay. Well, that's that one. We got one more. Number 2 seed Clueless versus the 6 seed Bottom Feeders. Allen is projected 106. Dylan's projected 98. Clueless unfortunately beat you, but unfortunate for him. And Dylan unfortunately beat me, but fortunate for him. These two did play in week 9, and Allen won 116 to 98. So let's just dive right into here, and I'll just start off with the quarterback position. You can't ask for anything better in fantasy when you're trying to get to the finals, and the quarterbacks on each team are playing each other. Mm-hmm. So what a quarterback tilt we're going to have here for this matchup. This is going to be exciting to watch. Just starting with Allen and Luck, this guy continues to surprise me this year. I think Luck, I did not think he'd come back to NFL and do what he's doing, but he's done it. 6 300-plus yard games this season. And I said last episode, I said Houston is going to shut down Luck, and I was wrong. Look what he did against them. Can he do it to Dallas? I think Dallas is a better defense than Houston lately, but we'll see. He's done it to Houston. What's to say he can't do it to Dallas? And he's at home. On the other side, you got Prescott. He's getting his wins. A lot of people are hyping up Dallas, but and you might attest to this when you talk, or I'll let you. He's still pretty shaky in these games. He didn't get going in Philly until late third, early fourth, and then into overtime. So he's still giving up the ball. He's getting exposed, but he's still getting the wins. He's only had one 300-plus yard game this season, and that was last week. I think he needs Cooper to go again because Zeke eats off a lot of points that Dak could get. And those are the handoff points where Dak isn't doing what maybe Breeze would do to his running backs, or Goff, or Mahomes, where he does that quick little pitch, and from fantasy-wise, you could gain that extra 6 points. So for me, I will be giving this matchup to Luck.
Okay, yeah, that's all very good stuff. I'm going to add just a little bit on there. Andrew Luck's playing the slightly tougher defense. But the thing about Andrew Luck this year, he always gives you quantity. And so he'll always be airing the ball out plenty, and he doesn't screw up all that much. Since week 4, only twice has he thrown for less than 3 touchdowns. Unfortunately, that's the last 2 weeks. But that's where he's been money, is the fact that he airs it out, but he gets the touchdowns. Whereas on the other side of the ball, Dak Prescott, he's getting a lot of love because he plays plays for the Cowboys and the Cowboys are winning. And I'm sure you can attest to this as far as Tony Romo getting all that love. I'm sure you always say, oh, it's just because he plays for Dallas.
Yeah. Well, a little technical difficulty here. He must have been in a dead zone there. I'm not sure where he ended up. But I'll just continue on, Randy. If you can hear me, we'll just we'll let
I can hear you if you can.
Oh, you can hear you now. So welcome back. We'll just let you continue on with your Tony Romo spiel.
Yeah, just talking about how I always felt that he was a better fantasy option than Dak is right now. Dak is playing an easier defense, but like you said, he has Zeke to eat a lot of the yards and touchdowns from. This Cowboys offense is built on time of possession, and that's not really that great for fantasy-wise because you don't get that many possessions. It's like, you kill half a quarter on one possession, and maybe you get a touchdown, maybe you kick a field goal, maybe you turn the ball over in the red zone, as Dak tends to do a lot. Now, you don't get extra points for where you turn the ball over, but still, most of his touchdowns in the last few weeks have been on long bombs to Amari Cooper or on busted coverage of some kind, and you can't depend on that every week. So I'm going to go ahead and agree with you and say that luck has the edge by as little as 5 points, depending on how good the defense does, but as much as 15 points, depending on how many touchdowns he gets versus Dak and how many turnovers he gets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it should be a close one anyway. I'm just glad he's not playing Stafford. So let's go right into the wide receiver. I'll just take this one as well, and then I'll let you kind of do yours, and then flip right into running back. Wide receivers for Clueless, we got Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas, so I'll just start there. Adams has scored 14. He scored 14 times, 14 points. The last time Green Bay played Chicago. Thank God for TDs because the yards have not been impressive over his last few games. So he's getting that 6 points plus maybe a few yards, right? So if he doesn't get those touchdowns, he's actually not producing that many fantasy points. It's going to be a tough rematch against Chicago because Chicago has drastically improved throughout the year, and I don't think Green Bay has improved as much as Chicago. But Adams is still obviously the number one receiver. Michael Thomas, the last 3 weeks have also not been kind to him. 3 points, 4 points, and 9 points. And it should be a shootout on the field against Carolina. Hopefully better than the week they played last week when New Orleans basically did nothing against Tampa Bay. But this guy needs a touchdown to make this matchup a little interesting. On the other side for Dylan, you got T.Y. Hilton, who I did not expect him to do what he did against Houston either, but he pulled off almost a 20-point performance. 3 of the last 4 games, he's got 100-plus yards, only 2 touchdowns, but still he's getting some yardage in stretching the field, and that's what you're going to need to do to Dallas to keep that defense on the field and tire them out. And like I say, he's going up against a good defense. Then you have Golden Tate. Not getting the targets I think one would hope from that trade and that acquisition. I'm just wondering, maybe would Demaryius Thomas be a better option? Houston's going up against the Jets because I don't think Crabtree is a play this week. And with the Rams defense and Tate, I just think maybe Dylan should look at Thomas, but these are just little notes. So for me, just based on kind of all that put together, without touching the flex for Allen where he has Lockett just yet, just based on the names and what they could accomplish, I will be going to Clueless as well for the wide receivers.
Okay, yeah, some very good points there. I agree with you on the Devontae Adams side of it for Clueless. It's a very tough matchup coming up here. Like I said when I was talking about Aaron Rodgers, there will be a lot of dinking and dunking sort of thing. Adams will still be very tough to cover in the end zone, as we saw this past week against the Falcons. So hopefully he gets that touchdown. It'll be very important one. Of course, obviously, I'm looking for him to have a rough start as I'm looking for the offense too. But like I said, with Aaron Rodgers and some garbage time and some fourth quarter comebacks and stuff like that, look for Devontae Adams to break out at that point. So he still has the potential to put up points, but I don't think he'll be dominated from start to finish, which is a real, which really allows you to pile up the fantasy points throughout the day. As far as Michael Thomas, I'm expecting the Saints to bounce back offensively, as I believe you are too. And I think Thomas will benefit from that, especially I mentioned at the Monday night game, Sean Payton will have a good offense ready to go. He'll have a lot of things planned out. He'll have everything ready to go, and Thomas will benefit from that. Flipping over to the bottom feeders with T.Y. Hilton, the unfortunate part about him is that all of his points will be Andrew Luck's points, so that doesn't really help bottom feeders out that much because every time he does well, Clueless's quarterback will do well. Again, it's a tough defense, could get some garbage.
Yeah. No, we're losing him again. We'll, yeah, no, you're back. Yeah, you're just in your little tunnel, aren't you?
Yeah, something's going on here with the signal, I guess.
Well, let's just hoping it happens starting tomorrow or Sunday when you're trying to tinker your team and I pull away with a win. So
yeah, well, my starting lineup doesn't need any tinkering. I will live and die with who I got here right now.
All right, let you continue on Hilton.
So yeah, so like I said, Hilton's points will be Andrew Luck's points, which doesn't really help bottom feeders out that much. Again, they're playing a tough defense, but there is potential for garbage time points. With Golden Tate, as you said, he just hasn't found his legs now. Maybe with the new quarterback who's not focusing on Zach Ertz. I know I said that he was going to pass to Zach Ertz. Maybe Foles will throw more to Golden Tate. Maybe he will. Or maybe he'll go to Aguilar more or someone else. Who knows? The Eagles are playing desperate after their loss to the Cowboys. It's unlikely they'll be able to catch them for the division, but they're still fighting for a wild card. So playing desperate, they might just take a chance on Golden Tate. There won't be any of this wait and see how he does in the offense in practice. It's win now or you might lose that wild card spot. And they could fall behind early and have to chase the game, and that leads to more passing as well. So that could give them a benefit, but I'm still not confident. And, I'm kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it as far as Golden Tate piling up points. So I'm going to give the edge to Adam and Thomas for Clueless.
All right. Just walk us right through running backs.
Sounds good. So for Clueless, David Johnson, expected just shy of 12 points. This is a great matchup for him. Atlanta defense is terrible, and Atlanta offense is terrible. So he should get plenty of opportunities, and Arizona should be able to stay in the game for a reasonable amount of time and use him a lot. They are also one of the worst teams in the league, the Falcons are, at defending against receiving running backs, and that's right up David Johnson's alley. So I'm expecting him to have a really good game, catching a lot of passes out of the backfield. Nick Chubb is expected to have another good one. However, he's played a very tough defense at Mile High. Can they stay on the field long enough with Baker Mayfield to get Nick Chubb the ball as often he's been getting? He'll get fed a lot because I don't think that Denver's going to exactly pull ahead early either. And then just as a side thing, this Nick Chubb versus back matchup should be fun to watch. And with the bottom feeders, I guess he's kind of he just wants to make sure he's starting a running back that's going to start, which is why at the moment he's got Jalen Samuels and Jeff Wilson Jr., who are the backups for Connor and Breda. So I guess he just wants to make sure that if Connor and Breda can't go, he's got to, then he's going to have at least one starter for those teams. Both these matchups are not the best, especially since on the Patriots side, I think the Patriots always go down to Miami and stink, but it always definitely stings to go down to Miami and stink it up, especially if you're the Patriots. So I think they'll come back with a bit of vengeance. We'll have a much better game. I think it'll be much more of a pass-happy game anyways. So I don't think Jalen Samuels' 11.15 points is that high. I don't think he'll get that much. And either way, Connor might start anyways. For Jeff Wilson Jr., it's a tough matchup. And I think Breda will have a better chance if he plays. So I'm gonna just, out of the fact that Bottom Feeders is playing two fill-in backup running backs, the edge goes to Johnson and Chubb.
Okay. Yeah, you brought up some interesting points. You stole my receiving running back points from Atlanta. So great find and great information there on David Johnson and what Atlanta's
Great
defense.
minds think alike, right?
Well, that's what they tell us anyway. He's getting so many carries, Randy, but I can't buy into David Johnson because his carry numbers are so high, but his yardages don't relate to that, I find. Like, 18 attempts, 55 yards, 18 attempts, 54 yards, 14 attempts, 39, 21, 98, 20, 69, 15, 49. I feel like those numbers should be bigger. But maybe he's just not getting the protection up front, which I don't watch enough Arizona games. But you're right. I think the matchup is here for him to finally do something. I've been shooting him down a fair bit, but maybe this is the week where Clueless can say, hey, told you so, and this is why I traded for him. And kind of hilarious, if Johnson has a big week, he could put the nail in the coffin of the guy he traded for. So interesting there. Nick Chubb, man, what a guy. And I'm not sure how you feel about letting him go, but 5 straight games with a touchdown. I think this guy's coming to life in Cleveland. He's found his own, and I think you're going to see Duke Johnson probably part ways with the team next year. Nick Chubb will be the number 1 running back for sure. He should have a day. I think you touched on it very well. I think Denver at home is a very tough place to play, and obviously you get pretty winded, but we'll see how he does against that defense. But I think those projections are probably bang on. On the other side with Samuels, like you say, I don't know if Connor's coming back, and it sounds like he's not from what I've been reading. But I don't get the 11-point projection here because New England has allowed 11th fewest to running backs, and I didn't see the numbers from him in his, debut or whatever. But maybe he'll be getting into the rhythm now and maybe do a little bit more damage. But if he's going, he's a number 1 running back, so those are the guys you want to play because they're getting the touches. Wilson Jr., this is his second game against Seattle in 3 weeks. They've played each other already. And he dropped 134 all-purpose on them, so will Seattle learn because it's been such a quick turnaround from when they played each other. Maybe they've made some adjustments to him, and Pete Carroll is taking note of that running back. But again, if Breda plays, what does that do to Wilson Jr.? Obviously, he'll have to bench him, and is Breda coming back good? Because I know he had an ankle injury, so just based on these two alone currently with this matchup, I got to give this category again to Clueless. Sorry, Dylan, but if you had Connor and Breda healthy, I think this is a different conversation. And I don't think Adams from Philly bumps up your score anyway, but Randy, and we can touch on that if we get to the flex. Getting into the tight end position, and I told you guys, and Randy, you were not part of the podcast, and I said to Alan, and he texted me, and if you listened, you heard. The winner of Cameron Brate and Austin Hooper would win that matchup, and what happened? Brate got the touchdowns.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason Clueless beat you. Well, he would like to think otherwise, but Brate got the points where that was that kind of push, as you like to call Ertz and Kittle. That was the push last week, and Brate managed to pull ahead. I don't think that's going to be the case this week. He's got a very tough Baltimore team, and I just don't see those touchdowns being repeated. But you never know. I'd like to see him go with Rudolph. I think Rudolph could be a better play here this week against Miami because Gronk stretched the field on them a bit. But we'll see. Rudolph's kind of not had the year we all thought he would. Kelsey on the other side, of course, this category will be going to Dillon and the bottom feeders. He's Mr. Security for Mahomes, especially if Hill and Watkins are banged up and Ware is doubtful. This is a guy who's going to need to catch the ball. Even though the Chargers are pretty good against the tight end, I think Kelsey's had career numbers this year, so look for him to continue. And I think that 11 could easily turn into 21. So I'm going to give it to Kelsey.
I agree with that. Especially your points on Cameron Brake as well. Like, you don't expect 2 touchdowns against the Ravens.
No.
And and like I said, for Kelsey, same thing. A short week, but it's a run and gun game. A really good game. Not much else to say about that. I give the edge to Kelsey as well.
Okay. If you want to touch on a flex or whatever you want, fine if you want to take that on before we touch base on defense.
Sure thing. Jordan Howard is the flex for Clueless, or at least he was when I made my notes. This is a good matchup, but can we really trust Jordan Howard at this point? Can we trust either of the Chicago running backs? I mean, it seems like the proper thing to do would be to pound the Green Bay defensive line with Jordan Howard all day, but the Bears, they just decided to put Tarek Cohen in just for a little thunder and lightning, and he ends up taking a lot of yards from him. As far as Josh Adams is on the other side, they're going up against a tough defense. He hasn't really showed that he's going to break out. Now, of course, they did play a tough defense last week against the Cowboys as well, but it's kind of the same thing. Can you trust either of these guys? I can't really trust either of them, so I'm not going to give an edge to either of them. I'm going to push on that one.
Okay. I'll say my note afterwards. We'll just talk about defense here. So we got Baltimore for Clueless, Indy for bottom feeders. Starting with Baltimore, if they play like they did against KC, look out for this, and I think they could absolutely annihilate Tampa Bay, because Tampa Bay is nowhere near KC's caliber.
Yeah.
And Baltimore, man, they are playing good, and don't be surprised for this to go from 8. Maybe it goes up to 15. Maybe they get a pick 6. Maybe they get a safety. So look for this defense to score. They're very hungry right now. They are in the wild card, but they need to secure the wild card. And they've had 4 15-plus point games this year as a defense. And that's saying a lot, because we don't really talk about their offense. So their defense is winning them most of those games, I'd like to think. On the other side, you got Indy. They're going to have to play good again for the second week in a row against Dallas. They are at home, but again, Dallas is coming to town, and they got to stop Zeke or don't allow Cooper to stretch the field. Like if Indy's doing anything, they're watching the film on how Cooper burnt that frickin' safety from Philly 3 times in a row, and you cannot let those guys stretch the field on you and get behind you. But I don't get the move here. There's no other defense on his bench. I don't know if he's hit the waivers, because why would you have your quarterback go up against your defense?
Exactly.
Or the opposing, up your own defense. That's what I'm trying to say. So I'm not sure if Dylan's paying attention and maybe waiting to see how the week goes and what matchups are out there, what options are there. But based on that alone, you have to give the edge to Clueless again with Baltimore.
Yeah. And, I agree with that. Baltimore certainly looked very impressive against Kansas City, keeping them in the game. I guess the main thing that might give Indianapolis a boost is just the fact that Dak Prescott does get sacked quite a bit, considering how mobile he's supposed to be. He does get some itch shoes once in a while when he gets it in his mind to pass the ball instead of just taking off and running. He also turns the ball over, not a whole lot in bad places, or at least at least not on his own side of the field. But like I said earlier, turnovers count for the same no matter where they are. But like you said, any turnover that the Indianapolis defense will get is only going to hurt his quarterback. So, he's damned if he do, damned if he don't.
Yeah, I would. And then just a side note here, we talked a lot about the rosters here, but one thing I want to mention, uh, Wilson's been all right. I'm just curious if maybe Dixon would be better over Adams. I'm just looking at that as well. I just know Dixon's starting to come to life, but we'll see. I mean, they're their rosters and they have opportunities to think. But I think there are some plug and plays for bottom feeders, and who knows what's out there on the waiver. But I think at this point you got to go with what you got. So, with that being said, I got to go with what I see, and I think Clueless pulls out the win probably by about 102 to 95, somewhere in there. That's what I think.
Yeah, yeah. This one won't be quite as close as the other one. I agree. Clueless is going to win by about 10 points.
All right. Well, there it is. We've the experts have spoken, and we can say that because we're outside observers now.
That's right.
But we got global warming moving on to the finals versus Clueless. That's who we think. But stranger things have happened, and I think there'll be some good matchups this week. So we'll look at this next week and break down the championship game before the season ends. It's crazy; it's coming to an end here already, but we don't want to take this episode on any longer than it has to be. So Ryan, Cody, Dylan, and Alan, good luck this weekend, and may the best win.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Good luck. We'll see you next week.
All right, take care.